Ooh. Hello? All right. What's up here? Okay. Howdy. I want to say thanks to Mac, Marin, Corey, Ashley. Thanks for setting this all up, organizing all this. It's been amazing. I like being in this homegrown community of artists. You know, when I first got here, I walked by the hotel, there was like a fuck Trump rally. And then there was a high school graduation on the walk here. And I walked by like parents smoking a blunt with their daughter. And I was like, I gotta speak today. I want some of that. But it's been a blast being here, so thanks for having me. I'm a supervising director at Titmouse Cartoons. What is Titmouse? It's a funny name. It's a bird. It's an animation studio. And we make cartoons.
Hey, listen.
Oh, all right, let me show the reel first. Pat Sperry's giving me a clue of what to do.
See, Cody never tells us the cool teen lingo like boing. We have to learn it from his friends. Boing.
Yeah, that there is a real nice boing.
Mom.
Boing, oing, oing.
Boing, yoing, yoing. That new teen slang is terrific.
Let's play some stickball with Nathan's hot dogs, you got one.
Oh, don't remember about it.
Sorry, do you mean forget about it?
Forget about what?
The thing you just said.
I'm not following you now.
Chirp. Okay. It's pretty cool stuff. Ooh, going again. Titmouse was created by Chris and Shannon Pranoski. They're a couple from New York. Chris P, as I call him, Chris Pranoski. He came from the New York scene of animation where MTV used to be cool and did like exploratory like TV blocks of television. And Liquid Television was that kind of mind-warping phase of late night TV for me. And Chris P is a person who kind of like, I didn't really know him growing up, but then when I met him and kind of learned of all the projects he worked in and what he was a part of, I'm like, oh, you're like a part of my like foundational like trauma sometimes, like in cartoons and stuff like that. But Liquid Television, I'll bring it up to kids today and I'd be like, you know, like Liquid Television, I'll just get this stare that's like, huh? I'm like, oh, I just feel old. Oh, but Beavis and Butthead came from there. Aeon Flux came from there. Bill Plimpton had cartoons. This was an especially like mind-warping phase for me. I was 11 years old watching this, and Chris P animated this for Beavis and Butthead Do America when they eat peyote. And this was, it's kind of done in this like Rob Zombie style. Rob Zombie music was playing, but they did it all on paper, pencil. But it was kind of one of the first things that was like colored digitally with ink and paint. He had to kind of prove it looked good on a big screen to Mike Judge, and it worked out because it looks fantastic. He's a gangsta. He's an OG. These are some of the projects we've done at Titmouse. We kind of got our break early on with Adult Swim, doing Metalocalypse and Super Jail. There was a cool G.I. Joe Resolute cartoon we did, and nowadays we do Critical Role on Amazon. Scavenger's Reign was this cool sci-fi show. Yeah, it's really good. And then we do like sitcoms like Big Mouth, and what I've been working on for the past 5 years, Star Trek Lower Decks. We turned 25 this year, and I've been there for almost 14 years now of those 25 years. Who are me? Who am I? Well, who am I now? I'm Barry Jen Kelly. I was born in 1984, the year the show Airwolf came out. It starred Jan Michael Vincent and Barry Van Dyke, and my name is Barry Jan Kelly. There's a coincidence there. I think my parents were really into this. Barry Manilow came into it too. But my dad was born and raised in Nebraska. My mom was from Panama. My dad was a drill sergeant, and they met when he was in the Army. And I loved growing up in Nebraska. But I was a nerd, kind of like escaping it all the time. And I think like I'm a typical nerd, like into comic books, video games, all that stuff. And it was before the Marvel Cinematic Universe was like mainstream, and before D&D was like live streamed with cool people on YouTube. And but I think a nerd generally is someone who like wants to obsessively understand something, anything. It could be sports. Sports nerds are the worst. It could be cars, WWE, computers, anything. But I fall into the category of the typical stuff: comic book movies, video games, action figures. And I'm an amalgam of all those things. And I don't think I can name them all, but I'm gonna try. RoboCop, Alien, Aliens, Star Wars Empire Strikes Back, Terminator 2, 2001 Space Odyssey, Akira, 8-Ball, X-Men, Preacher, Final Fantasy, Street Fighter, Legend of Zelda, The Simpsons, Batman Animated Series, Neon Genesis, Evangelion, Star Trek Next Generation, Twilight Zone, and those re-edited G.I. Joe PSAs. Those are so influential for me, and they're like 20 years old now, and I'm still quoting them to this day. But all this stuff kind of made me want to be one of three things. One was a comic book artist, one was like a creature makeup effects artist, for film, like Stan Winston or Rob Bottin, Rick Baker, or a filmmaker. And in the 90s, comic book artists were making millions of dollars. That's not the case anymore. And makeup effects artists and creature effects was kind of replaced with CGI, so that's not really, an opportunity anymore. So I found myself wanting to draw, but in this filmmaker zone, and kind of animation kind of sucked me in. And I think that happens to a lot of there's like a whole sect of like wannabe comic book artists that got sucked into animation in LA. I'm one of those. What now? Okay, PB. How did I do in school? Not do great. My brother and sister were straight A students, but I was more of a C+ kid. Sorry, you can't escape the baby photos either on my presentation. But I think being the youngest of three kids, my parents, saw me drawing like monsters, mutilating people, and they're like, it'll be all right. But I drew a lot. This is like my high school art. It's like, there's tons of rendering. There's a lot of details. But there's not a lot of foundation, not a lot of structure, not a lot of values. There's like a lot of floating details on things. Like I'm kind of embarrassed to show this. I haven't showed this to really anybody. But you can see what I was into. And at the same time, I went to a tech school in high school. And this is like, I'm old. It's like 2000, 2001. And we had a computer lab of G3 Mac Towers with the 30 gig hard drive. It was amazing. We thought they'd never fill that up. But, I got access to Photoshop, Final Cut Pro, Combustion, Cinema 4D, After Effects, and our teachers didn't really know this software. They knew Final Cut Pro. They actually wrote the technical manual for Final Cut Pro at the time, but they didn't know anything else. So it was just us fucking around. We didn't know what we were doing. I'm also going to say Flash. I know it's Adobe Animate now, but I called it Flash for 15 years. I can't shake it. I'm sorry. So if I say Flash, I'm talking about Adobe Animate. But here's some bad Flash animations I made in high school when I was just screwing around making Batman all broody and stuff. And then here's what my friends were making of me, which was a lot better. But we were just making like goofy stuff. We didn't know what we were doing. PB, after high school. Okay. I went to Full Sail Film School in Orlando. And it's funny, I found it in the ads of a comic book. Like I flipped through it and like, oh, this is exactly what I want to do. Well, I'll go there. And I learned cameras, which is cool. And learned the dynamic of working with the crew. Like I'm being of service, to my student director who I was working for, or if I was a director, then, the crew would be in service to me. So that was an early learning experience. I learned Murphy's Law, and that I'm a stress head. Those kind of go together. Whatever can go wrong will go wrong, and that happens a lot on a film shoot. It kind of makes you need to like pre-plan a lot because everything goes wrong. You're like stressed out. You're trying to like shoot a bunch of stuff before sunlight. You run out of sunlight, or you lose an actor. Very trauma-inducing, but it made me think about pre-planning ahead and how to expect. You don't have control over everything. A lot of speakers, I like that they're kind of repeating that theme of like, you have to let go of control because that's what that is all about, because anything can go wrong. So I'm a stress head, and I learned I didn't like myself as a film student so much. Like I felt like I was taking myself way too seriously and judging people for not being as serious as I was about it. And it's like, oh, I'm a douchebag. And I just, had to get over that. I like making stuff. I didn't really like studying it or theorizing it. Like making stuff made me feel better about myself. I also learned that I hated getting up at 5 a.m. for shoots. So I was like, can I just sit behind a computer all day so I can get up when I want? I'm like, okay, I'm not going to do live action anymore. What a baby. You're a baby, whatever. So I wish that I had the social network and the internet as it is today with all the YouTube and the streamers and all the people who were, doing all that stuff. But I didn't know what else to do in 2005. So I just moved to LA. That's where creative people were. I draw. Let me go. And when I got there, my drawing chops were not up to par. I could draw for my friends around me. And then when I got to LA, I got around professionals who could draw, and they could see right through my stuff. I was lugging like a big paper portfolio with drawings of comic book pages and monsters and stuff like that. And they could see right through my stuff. It had bad anatomy, bad perspective. They could see everything I was avoiding drawing, which was like buildings and cars and feet. And I was like, okay, I guess I can't do that. So I took whatever gig I got. What kind of gigs? Well, let's start from the top. Nebraska. I was a referee for girls soccer. I was terrible at it. The parents were the worst part. I worked at McDonald's. That's another early phase where I learned being of service was totally helpful to people because that's all you were. I was 15 years old. I couldn't work on the grill. You have to be 16 to do that. And when I learned being of service, got me a raise, and I was like, oh, you like me? So you're giving me a raise? I was like, this ain't gonna work out. It's like my relationships. It's like, it's not gonna work out if you like this. Some illustration I didn't have any business doing. Like friend of friends were asking me to draw stuff, and like when I look back at it, I'm like just embarrassed by it. I worked at this store called Gadzooks. It's like as if Hot Topic and Spencer Gifts picked up a baby. But it was kind of high school boy heaven because every summer you could help girls try on bikinis, so that was great. In LA, I moved to LA. I was a grip in PA on student film shoots. I was also an extra, background artist. And that was kind of interesting because I could say like, hey mom, I'm gonna be on Drake and Josh tonight. You might see the back of my head. And she'd be like, I saw you. What's funny is even crew members today will catch me in things and they'll be like, were you in this movie? I was like, I was young. I needed the money. Get off my back. But also I'm like, what are you doing watching that movie? I was a video game tester, which is like being an extra in the video game industry. And then these last three kind of all happened at the same time. I got a story development internship. I was still doing some illustration, but I had no business doing it because when I look back on it, I'm like, that was ripping these people off. But story development intern was kind of like the typical Hollywood exec office. And I'm in a button-up shirt, answering phones, running stuff. And like a lot of people really thrive in that Hollywood executive environment. I'm like, this isn't for me. I don't like this. And I also got the storyboard internship at Animax. Why am I telling you this? Because, well, let me go back a second. Why am I telling you all this? Because I think we're in the mindset of, if we do what our parents kind of tell us to do. Like you're supposed to check off, X, Y, Z. You're gonna have a job. You're gonna be happy, and you're gonna have a family by the time you're 25. I love some of the presentations from the other folks here because like the Lasso peeps, Lindsay and Alan, how they showed the getting from here to there, and it's a big windy, mess of stuff that you're gonna get into. That's exactly how I realized it was happening. Was that it's like a big freeway you're jumping onto and you're just hitting all these bumps along the road and you think it's gonna be a straight shot or climbing up that ladder and it's like just a big windy road. You're running into people. Some people you meet along the way and you don't see them for a while and they come back in your life, or you gotta make a U-turn and come back. It's not a straight road. And like me being that kind of shitty douchebag in film school, like some of the friends I met there that maybe I was like mean to, or maybe they were mean to me, like I realized later on, either I was getting them work or they were helping me out when I was in a situation. So I got the storyboard internship at Animax Entertainment, and it was not the best time for 2D, kind of like today. A little grim, but the reason why it wasn't the greatest is because I started working there after the fallout of like, there was a lot of layoffs from traditional animators in that 2D features were kind of going down and 3D like Pixar-like features were on the rise. So there was a lot of artists who put all their eggs in that basket of traditional animation who suddenly are now, their skills are kind of obsolete and no one's hiring them. So I quickly learned like, oh God, this industry could just turn on the drop of a hat. And it's happened like, if I consider now this period, this is like the third time this has kind of been through. It's like every 10 years this kind of happens. I wanted to stick to 2D though, because I think 2D is timeless. I think, a Disney movie from the 40s looks amazing today. And like when something is more on like technological, like Toy Story now is like a little bit more dated than, something made from the 40s. But, when I got this job at Animax, I was a storyboard intern and I was drawing like rough board revisions on paper, doing like some bad animation retakes. I was mediocre at all these things. But because of that school I went to, I knew editing, animatics, compositing, motion graphics. Editing, I'd scan paper boards and cut them in Final Cut Pro and kind of move, the page to where the panel was. And in compositing, I was taking backgrounds from a background artist and taking character animation from a character animator and putting it all in After Effects and adding camera moves and all this stuff to it. And if this company needed motion graphics, I'd be doing that. I'd be doing deliverables. I'd be laying stuff to tape. Oh, I'm so glad we're done with tape. But that was Animax. Like it was like 4 or 5 of us, and like I had to do a lot of jobs. I had to juggle a lot of hats. I found myself teaching Flash and After Effects to those artists who were kind of laid off or looking for work. Like I found myself teaching people the skill set. They had the skills I wanted as a traditional animator, but I was teaching them the technical skills, and they both were kind of like colliding in a way. They were not only struggling to learn the program, they were struggling just to learn a computer. And I wrote a book on Flash with some peers of mine. We taught a lot of workshops for those people, but all this information is dated now, so you can't use it. It's pretty old. Let's see. One thing at Animax, I got to work for Dave Thomas. He's the guy on the left. This was, I don't know if you're old enough to know Strange Brew, but it was a childhood favorite of mine. 2 Canadian hosers, they were kind of stereotypes, but he was a pretty famous comedic actor, and I got like 5 years of like comedy training school for editing and timing and all that stuff. This is some of the early cartoons I made. This is literally like the first cartoon I made in Flash with Animax. And it was like a Scooby-Doo, National Geographic thing. I had to do all these graphics in SD. This is before HD, people, okay? 720 by 480. And this was ESPN Off Mics. This was like an old Flash cartoon that we made for Mike and Mike in the Morning. I used to like get clips of their radio show and we'd animate dumb stuff to it. And that won us an Emmy. In 2005, I was 19 years old. We won our first Emmy. And I peaked way too early. But what's funny about this, I think it's before the term web series came out because the name for the Emmy was Outstanding Achievement in Content for Non-Traditional Media Delivery. In other words, web series. That's all it needed to be now. Flash was the rage back then. Everybody was using it for websites, games, virtual worlds, character animation. Virtual worlds was like if you bought a toy, they'd make like you could scan the barcode in and like take the toy and you got like an avatar in a game or something like that. But it felt like in 2008, 2009, like everyone got wise and were like, why are we making this stuff in Flash? Like websites, games, like it's so burdensome, it's not safe. And I feel like character animation was one of the like audiences or users they were targeting the least, and now we're kind of like the only people who use it. But a lot of work dried up. So in 2008, the economic recession happened. A lot of people were laid off. I was laid off eventually. Animax had to let go a bunch of people. Like everyone stopped investing in those kinds of projects. And, you know, this is kind of the second boom that kind of happened. Like when I moved out there, it was happening, and now here's number 2. So now it's like, what do I do? Now what? I wasn't really sure. I wasn't even sure if I wanted to stay in animation because, this was a very good job. I was doing Flash animation, but I wasn't really doing, I'm a filmmaker at heart. I wasn't really doing the cinematic storytelling that I wanted to do. And I'm like, I don't even know if I can do this. But the one thing I could do was invest in myself. And the way I kept afloat was like I had editing gigs, I was doing corporate stuff, Home and Garden TV, Food Network, special features on Blu-rays, and I said, I gotta do what makes me happy, so I went all in on drawing. Screw it, let's do it. And I took every single workshop I could. It was like sculpting, traditional drawing, head drawing, figure drawing, 3D sculpting, everything, just to give myself a kick in the butt. I had to quit video games for like 2 years. That was the worst part. Mass Effect 2 had just come out. I didn't play it for 4 years. But now I try to take a workshop every year just to keep myself, it could just be the same workshop. I'm taking Unreal stuff, I'm taking Blender stuff, but like I'll take a figure drawing again, head drawing, I'll take it all just to keep me sharp. I did go to art school. I went to film school, but if you can afford it, this is for the youngins, I guess, or if you have kids who are gonna go into this school, if you can afford it, you got a scholarship, do it. Just go in there, go explore and fail for like a couple of years, so you'll learn more. But I would avoid the debt as much as possible. I didn't have the YouTube streamers and all the people giving out this information. I used to have to buy DVDs from Noman. The concept art was all the rage, and it was like $150 for a DVD you hoped had something useful in it. These are dark times, people. Oh, cute break. I got married. This is my wife. She's lovely. This is my wife, Jennifer. She's the head of production at Titmouse, actually, and that's my dog, Clooney. We're hoping to add more to them. Just a little cute break. Okay, now we're back at Titmouse. My buddy Ben Kalina called me, or Ken Balina as I call him. And he said, do you want to come edit on this show called Motor City? And this is where I'm like, I'm really trying to draw, man. And I'm like, I don't know if I want to get back into editing. But then I saw the show and I met Chris P. And this was a show on Disney XD. I looked really freaking cool. And this is 14 years old now. But when I saw this, I was like, oh my God, these guys do the storytelling I want to do. This is exactly what I want to do. And it's Flash. But instead of doing like the typical puppet rig pipeline, they were doing a traditional pipeline, but using just Flash as like the digital tool. So it was, rough animation was done by a rough animator, then cleanup animators took it and cleaned it up, added color. Then it went to an effects animator did all the dust. If you want to break into the industry and have a job forever, do effects animation, do lightning, do water, do cement, blocks, crashing, like you'll be sought after forever. We always need effects artists. But it was doing all the stuff I wanted to do. I thought this stuff was only done in anime or features, and that stuff seemed unattainable. But when I met them, it's like, boom, oh, you guys are doing it. And that's where I found myself surrounded by the artists doing what I wanted to do. And my buddies they're now the Critical Role directors, they're doing Mighty Nine and Vox Machina, Sung Jin An and Juno Lee. They saw that I cared about trying to do drawing, and they started to, give me some sequences here and there to do storyboards. It was kind of like, if you see like second unit photography on a film, there's someone who goes out and shoots coverage, extra action shots or extra B-roll, whatever. Like they kind of give me that stuff. They're like, we got to do a bunch of action here. Can you just like draw, a bunch of stuff and we'll see if we can use it. And slowly, the producers noticed and they saw that, maybe it's worth giving me a shot. And then we took a risk on each other in that I risked losing a steady job and they risked losing a good editor, but it worked out. So I started drawing storyboards, and here's a little bit of that. And storyboards are different depending on the production. Like if you're at an ad agency, maybe AI is taking over some of this now, but, usually there's, presentation boards. You got to paint them and make, nice renderings of cars or camera angles that go around each other. In live action, there's kind of like just pencil drawings that help shot list. For big VFX films, you got previs, doing all the cool camera moves and stuff like that. Those are storyboards. And then in animation features, it's a lot more gestural. It's usually just characters. They're trying to find the story in the characters, so it's just kind of the characters on a grid. But I specialize in series animation. So through all, that experience of compositing, editing, doing final delivery on projects, I kind of understood where the nuts and bolts of everything was coming from, where the backgrounds were coming from, what I'm triggering, in each department and where it's coming from. So it made me a good fit for a director, especially on in-house projects. So these are some of the projects I got to direct. Venture Brothers. This was season 7. I already boarded on season 6, so I knew what to expect. This was a good kick in the butt because this is a super dense show. We're in season 7. There's like so many storylines of characters. I can barely keep track of it. And there's always a lot of characters on screen, a lot of action, just a lot of juggling of, dense scripts. Then I did Son of Zorn, which is really fun. It was like a VFX job, essentially. We kind of were the VFX supervisors and the animators. This is all Flash. This show was super funny. Everyone liked it. The ratings were really good. It just didn't get picked up. That's one thing I learned too. In the 15 years at this point, I think I was on Zorn 15 years in the industry, never had a show got picked up. They all got canceled in season 1. And that's like the norm, sadly. This is some fun behind the scenes stuff with that. This is for Lord and Miller too. That was really fun. I did this like Deadpool pitch that technically the show does not exist, but I made a pitch for it. It was pretty fun to make. Then I got to participate in my favorite section of the video store, the STs. Star Wars, Star Trek, Street Fighter. So Star Wars Galaxy of Adventures was a bunch of shorts I made for Lucasfilm. This is the test I made for them. When I pitched it to them, I botched the pitch, but luckily I had this at the end that saved my butt. It ended up looking like this, which was all Flash, and I wanted to do, I don't really like drawing in Flash. It's like drawing with a big fat Sharpie. So I wanted to make a lineless version. So it's more of a painted silhouette style that I made for it. But what was a blast was that I got to play in the sandbox of Star Wars, and I got to play with the OG characters. Those are the characters I love, and not many people get to do that. So now let's double down. That was a franchise that was 40 years old, and I said, let's go to one with 50 years old with even more older fans who I'm ready to have to impress. And that's Star Trek Lower Decks. This was the first show I actually got a season pickup on. Never had that feeling before, so we actually got 5 full seasons of Star Trek Lower Decks. This was on Paramount Plus. Super fun show. This is the typical like Flash puppet rig style, but we're trying to push it as much as we can. I wanted it to feel like a sitcom that was shot with the camera. This show was created by Mike McMahon, who was the head writer of Rick and Morty, and he makes this show and Solar Opposites now. He's an amazing writer, really great scripts, super fun show. And if it's made in a way that like, if you're a Star Trek fan, great, but it's made for everybody. Until finally this year, I got to direct Overwatch 2 Street Fighter 6 collaboration trailer, which was super fun, totally different from Lower Decks. Where Lower Decks was like a Flash puppet rig style, this was all traditional animation, more of an anime project, and it was all like TV Paint, Clip Studio Pro, Blender, Flash. Some was in Flash. Just every artist was animating a different program, and we had it cleaned up one way. But it was super fun to work on. I always wanted to work on something Street Fighter. I draw Street Fighter for fun, and it was a bonus to get paid for it. Now, that's enough about me. I'll just talk about what directors do in animation, what I do every day. I'm talking about a lot about being of service. A director is someone who's in service to everybody. And we're in service to the project and the story, which also makes us a buzzkill. I don't like giving notes. I don't like bumming people out. And, when we have a project, we do a lot of work. I'm constantly like making us redo stuff, retakes, pressure on the crew. You know, I don't like being that buzzkill, but it's always like, I'm always trying to explain to people like the notes, it's not me giving a note, it's the story asking for the note. The writer, Mike McMahon, it's always what the story is telling him it needs to be. So I'm always like trying to get people on board with thinking like we're trying to do what's best for the story, not what we want, but what the story is telling us to do. Because what we get to do is we get to read the script first before anybody. And I get to watch that show happen in my head, and it plays out, and it's super freaking funny. And now I'm like tasked with, I gotta make this freaking thing, man. How am I gonna keep up with the vision that was in my head that I just read? And it's a lot of work. 5 seasons is 50 episodes total. Each episode's 22 minutes, 25 minutes, 300 to 400 shots, give or take. 350 shots times 10 episodes, it's 3,500. 17,500 shots total for across all 5 seasons. It's like 11 90-minute feature films. So for every shot that happens, there's a storyboard that's giving information to all the artists. And I'm in my head, like I'm the supervising director at this point. So episodic directors, they kind of handle, they have a handful of episodes per season. They kind of only manage the board side of it. But as a supervising director, I'm watching everything from beginning to end. So I'm on it all the way from, I'm doing viz dev for the script at the beginning, all the way I'm checking in with designs, checking in with backgrounds, checking with characters, checking with animation, composite, everything all the way to the end until we deliver. And I'm thinking about what that board is triggering for each artist. So for instance, in this one shot, I'm thinking about, okay, that background I drew in the board is now triggering a background layout artist, and a background painter. What they're gonna do is gonna trigger an effects artist for what they're gonna do for the phaser and the slime in the front, and it's gonna trigger a character animator for what the character needs to do. And I'm constantly thinking about how many things am I asking them to do in one season? I'm always trying to manage the energy, manage the stress, manage everything for the crew. What's it all add up to? Raspberry, oh my gosh. Image making. That's what we all do. So I'm gonna talk to y'all like you're my crew. This is what I tell the crew over and over again. It's also to remind myself what to do over and over again. If you were ever finding yourself, struggling, trying to make an image or anything, hopefully you can revert back to some of these steps. And I'm gonna give you some just pretty technical stuff. Clear, not clean. It's kind of the same as keep it simple, stupid. KISS. You need to be clear about the information you're giving to your crew and your audience. They're 2 different things. For your crew, the information is how to tell the story. And for your audience, it's the information needed to understand it. If you want to be clear about something, you need to tell them. And if you want to be vague about something, you need to make sure you're clear about it being vague, as stupid as that sentence sounds. You need to be clear about what you're not telling them. What information are you keeping for yourself so that they don't get the wrong answer or get the wrong idea? And clear ultimately applies to drawings, as I love this artist, Stephen Platt. It's crazy. I don't know what the hell's going on in this drawing. There's all this beautiful line work, all this rendering, all this stuff. I don't know what the hell's going on there. So it's a clean drawing. It's not very clear. This is the same thing happening, but it's clear, not very clean. The lines are kind of ugly, but you understand much more of what's going on. There's a cartoon hole in some guy's chest. Avoid this. Sometimes I get boards like this, or their thumbnails, and I'm like, am I looking up? Am I looking down? Can I just get a box or something to tell me which way I'm looking up? It's too vague, so avoid this. Silhouettes. This is old stuff that I'm sure we've all heard in some class, but it took a long time for it to click for me. And that is for shots, for framing. You can cram in as many silhouettes as you want as they're all clearly fitting together. And I always tell the crew, watch Star Trek. Just watch Star Trek. It's super clear. It's, I know it's maybe it looks a little dated because it has that 4:3 square box around it, but that shit's shot on film. You can widen that out. It's a perfect 16:9 frame. That's a beautiful image. And all the silhouettes are clear. This show is packed with characters. Star Trek is the greatest show on TV because it's film school in a can. It teaches you how to make a show. It teaches you how to write a show. It teaches you everything. There's few shows like that. Twilight Zone's one of those. I'll say Buffy the Vampire Slayer is kind of like that. It all teaches you how to make a show. For silhouettes, also, for poses, you can tell exactly what's going on in those silhouettes even without seeing the detail. You can tell like Hulk's foot, the left foot's in front of the right foot, this hand's in front of this hand. It's all things just to keep in mind, and it just does the work for you. Like it took me so long to let this like sink in. So a lot of times I'll just do a sheet of silhouettes if I'm trying to figure out a design. They tell you it's more important in design. They usually stress silhouettes, but like just figuring out a pose, just do the silhouette. Tangents. We always hear about tangents. Like I made like this image kind of like screwed up so the tangents were bad. But I just say, just look for solid T's. Just look for intersections with solid T's. Don't try to let stuff like bend into each other. If you're drawing rough and you're trying to like just line up silhouettes or doing like a thumbnail image, draw it thick, especially if you're digital. Use a thick brush because, here's what happens. When you draw on paper, your hand's only moving like this. It should be moving with your elbow. I always try to remember, draw with your elbow, not with your wrist. But you're just drawing like that. But when you go digital, you're suddenly like zooming in a lot and you're drawing like this, but it's the smallest line that's on screen. So in order to keep your image clear, draw with a thicker brush, and it'll force you to have to like zoom out and forget the details and just focus on the composition and the image. I'm just doing a little drawing just for this session, just to figure out it doesn't make sense. It's like Star Wars, Star Trek, Street Fighter stuff. But yeah, you can kind of see that I'm just like going through it. This is the one I ended up going with. But it just helps you not think about the details. Lenses and perspective. I'll come back to that drawing later. Lower Decks is like your typical sitcom. It's 3/4, kind of like that comic strip looking feel. And like, even though as graphic as these characters are, they have volume, they have shape. And there is a lens that they're being shot with. And the way you can, find what lens you're shooting at is just kind of make that perspective grid really flat, like you're shooting it with a really long lens. So what the beauty of these characters is like you can make them work at high, low angles if it's an isometric perspective, and you don't need like a crazy, tweaky, distorted perspective just to make something look cinematic. It looks cinematic regardless if it just stays isometric. All these are isometric shots. For instance, I took like a free model I found of Homer on the couch. This couch image of The Simpsons. It's like, it's like the classic 3/4 comic strip version, but they are drawing with a lens because of how flat the TV is and everything is in there. So here's the flatter. They're like you pull out, zoom in far, and you get the flatter perspective. And if you shoot too wide, you get this crazy distorted, Homer. Some of you all know this. This is all I love lenses and all that stuff, but that you would never draw Homer like that. Maybe if it was like a Trip Out episode or something like that. But it's the same thing with Lower Decks. With the ship, if we do a super wide lens, it looks like a freaking toy. But I can use that to make it feel fast or something, like maybe the perspective is really strong. But if I shoot it with a longer lens, it goes flatter and you can see more of the ship. And even though maybe you don't know, the average person doesn't know like the visual vocabulary to explain why that feels bigger, but it's because it feels like you had to get back really far to fit it in frame. It's like when you're watching football and like all the characters, all the players are like the same size. You had to go back, they can't get in on the action, so they have to go back really far and zoom in. So that perspective grid is super, super flat, and that's not even that far away. Like we had to get way farther back to shoot that spaceship. But you see like the wider lens, you got the distortion of the characters, it feels like cinematic and dynamic, but it doesn't feel like, this tells you like it's real, like it's really there. Horizon, shoulders and crotches and shoulders. That's an easy way to figure out where the horizon is. It's just like, do people's shoulders and crotches line up? And there's taller people, there's short people, but generally like a half or head, difference, they'll line up. Like this board, for instance, like I think we fixed this later, but I try to pull like, some boards that I had notes on. And this, for instance, this guy is actually super tall, but he looks like he's in the ground, in the foreground. These characters, she's supposed to be a lot shorter than them, so she's like too high, they're like floating off the ground. This city back there, I don't know why it's so low. So those are the type of things I'm looking for that make it feel, like a shot versus a drawing, and I'll explain that in a second. This little stuff here, just I can see this character's legs are lower than her front legs. That doesn't make sense. So it looks like they're not working in the space. A lot of times it feels like It's just characters in front of a stage, and you want to make it feel like they are, actually in the space they're in. And I say draw beyond the frame all the time, so that this works. Even if it's off frame, you should at least rough it out so that it doesn't feel like that. It'll make your shots feel far more real, far more like they're in, not even like realistic, but that make your characters feel like they're in the same space. And this is like an easy breakdown I used to give lower deckers for, just make sure your crotches, your shoulders line up. Here's some horizon changes. These are shots that I, after season 1, I kind of did like a, what do you call it when you, what do you call it? When you postmortem. There you go. Thank you, nobody helped me. But like the horizon line's like kind of right in the middle of all these shots, and that's just boring. So, you could do something simple like raise it up a little bit, then you can see the characters on screen, a little bit clearer, you get a nice shot of what they're eating. Or here, you can put it a little bit lower so that, you get a little bit of a dynamic shot. Or like here, this is one I let slip by and I never want to see this. Like it's a different style of show than what we make. So like I would have done this instead, like just move the camera a little bit, move the characters a little bit just to make it interesting, more framing. Always have like a big, medium, small shape. She's big, he's medium, they're small. Like always try to have that, Then value and contrast. We know this, but some of us need it beat into us like me, so I need reminded. But always make the focal point the highest point of contrast. So in this instance, it's Vader. He is the only thing that has full black and full white and that little bit of red. Moving on. Oh no, maybe not. There we go. And I'm thinking about that on lower decks too, all the time. Just how to separate the background from the foreground and like maybe making the characters in the foreground either a little bit darker or the reverse. You kind of organize your values in a way so that it's easy to read. Like I learned to paint through value studies first. And if you paint in black and white, you can put whatever shitty color you want on it. It's still gonna work. It looks great. This is what I was talking about, a little bit of drawings versus shots. Again, like the space over here doesn't really work cohesively, but it could work as a drawing. Like there are some shows that do have that. Like they're much more graphic. They're not really shot by a camera. But if, for instance, on lower decks, I needed to feel more like it's shot with the camera, so the space needs to make a little bit more sense. There's just like a lot of negative space up here. It's a stylistic choice if you wanted to go with that, but I want it to feel like it's shot with the camera, so it needs to feel like, not even the camera, like I'm a person standing there next to them and the space works. These are other guides I made for them that was just like, we kind of had a difference between normal shots and action shots, which in lower decks, I'm always triggering like, is this a comedy shot, comedy moment, or is this a sci-fi moment? And that's kind of what it boils down to. These ones are more flatter. There are, just the perspective grids are just more, they're less tweaky. They're not as distorted. But then once we get into action, we can do that. You can distort that, make her fucking hands like super, super tweaky when they're high up, or even her backhand like a little bit more. We're trying to be conscious of all this. And that's some basic image making stuff. I wish I could explain more. I don't want to take up more of your time. But now if you're directing, and you have crew under you, you're getting asked questions all day. And you don't know the answer to everything. So if you don't know the answer, just ask for 10 minutes. And then see if you should come up with something. I stole that from Brad Bird, who made Incredibles. Great piece of advice. Onboard the crew, any new crew, the way you'd want to be onboarded. That's just treat people the way you want to be treated. There's some people who hand off stuff to you with nothing, and there's some people who like really make it a point so that you get your job right and really set you up for success, right? I want to be one of those people. Set up work block times for yourself so you can have time for your own assignments, because you'll always be saying like, oh, I can do that. I can do that myself. And then the whole day is done. You've had a whole bunch of meetings and you have time and you're exhausted and you're like, oh man, I don't have time for myself. So just make sure you give yourself time. Leave breadcrumbs for your future self. It's funny to hear, Mac talk about past us versus future us. That's what I'm always thinking about. I'm like, sometimes I'm starting these shows like so far in advance that I'm not getting the final footage back until 8 months later. And I'm like, what was I thinking when I did this 8 months ago? So like I make these guides and I make these storyboards to help remind myself what the hell I was doing 8 months ago. Why did I say this? Anything else? All right, PB, I'll wrap it up. Last few things I wish I could tell past Barry. I'll go through these really fast. If I could go back and tell my younger self who was taking everything so seriously in film school, I'd tell them to pay attention to the people around them and loosen up. Don't be clean, be clear. If you just go for clear, you'll end up with clean. Be of service to your team, to your story, to your younger self who loved cartoons. So I've heard people saying similar things in these talks, and it's great to hear. So I'm reiterating it again. Finding your place is kind of how you build yourself. Embrace learning and fail and get better. That's the antidote to becoming obsolete. You think your career path is a straight line? I talked about that. It's a winding road. All of us have brought that up. You just never know how things are going to go. You have no control over it, so just focus on yourself, invest in yourself. I always tell younger folks, like, there's some really talented kids coming out of school these days. So I'm like, you might be my boss one day. So it's the same thing. You never know who's going to be what, whoever's going to get a show. So don't be afraid of change, because change is coming whether you like it or not. It's the one variable you actually know. Like, you know that stuff is going to change. So what can you do? What do you have control over? You have control over yourself. You can invest in yourself, get better at drawing, get better at whatever skill you want. Spend time with your family. It's even better if you enjoy it. All right. That's 45 minutes. I'm out. Thank you, Dash Bash. Thank you, everybody.